Have you ever been treated unfairly by an employer? I have, and I know many other people have as well. The Bible actually gives employers some very solid biblical advice when dealing with employees or those that they rule over. You might be shocked by the last thing I share, so stay tuned for the whole video. Colossians 4:1 is our passage today, and it says this in the New American Standard Bible: Masters, grant to your slaves justice and fairness, knowing that you too have a master in heaven. A master is one who has authority over someone else. And a servant or a slave, depending on your Bible version that you're reading, is someone who is either an employee, a servant, or even an indentured servant. Now, we talked about the terms master and servant in the last study. So go and check out that video to get a little deeper meaning of what those two words mean. Today, we're going to apply those principles in this verse to employers and employees and see what we can learn about what Paul is telling us. An employer has a responsibility to be fair and just with their employees. Now, being fair and just means that you pay a fair wage, that you provide a safe working environment, that you follow applicable laws, that you don't look down on one employee over another employee, that you are reasonable with your employees, and that you don't take advantage of an employee. Being a just employer also includes recognizing that people are valuable and equal as human beings. In other words, an employer shouldn't treat one person differently than another. They shouldn't look down on or devalue one person based on their race, their gender, their social or economic status, but really recognize that all people have value and should be treated with respect. Pay, for example, should be based on things like training, ability, and effort. An employee who works hard, does their job well, should be compensated appropriately. When that employee works hard and they benefit the company, the organization, if you will, then the employer has a responsibility to pay them what they're worth, to pay them fairly. Now, on the other hand, there are some employees who don't work as hard. They're lazy. They stand around and talk on their phone. They do things that are distracting or don't bring value to the company. Well, in that situation, the employer has a responsibility to pay them fairly as well, pay them what they're worth. And it's probably not near as much as the employee who's actually doing their job and doing what they're supposed to do. I went into the store the other day and there was a group of employees just standing around talking about personal lives and who knows what. But they were absolutely not interested in helping me. I couldn't get one of them to help me with anything. And in fact, they acted a bit put out that there were people in the store that needed their help. Now, on the other hand, there's somebody who's right across the aisle and they're working hard. They're doing their job. They're helping people. They're being a benefit to the employer. Should those two people or groups of people be compensated the same? I don't think so. There are a lot of people complaining about their wages, their benefits, and wanting more. It's easy to cry for justice and fairness. However, we need to keep in mind that justice and fairness take into consideration the value of the laborer. If the laborer is not doing the job, if they're not bringing value to the employer, then should they be paid more? I don't think so. And some in our culture have this a little mixed up. If we want a higher wage, if we want to earn more and get more benefits, then we should bring value to the employer. And when we do, the employer then has a responsibility to treat the employee fairly and to compensate them with a fair and reasonable wage. So if you're doing your job the way you're supposed to and you're bringing benefit to the employer, that employer has a responsibility to compensate you appropriately. But don't be crying for justice and fairness if you're not doing your job and you're not bringing benefit to the employer. Let me share one last thing that may shock some of you. Some people really kind of get offended at this, but I want you to hear me out. I want you to think about what I'm saying. The Apostle Paul never tells masters to release those who are indentured servants or slaves. However, this doesn't mean he approved of slavery. He didn't. But he focused his teaching and his efforts on teaching the people, the employers, to treat people with fairness, with justice, and with equality. That's what Paul did. And at the end of the day, that is the foundation for the argument against slavery. How can an employer or a master view people as equal and treat them justly and fairly and keep them as indentured servants? They can't. Paul further stresses the importance of treating people with equality, with fairness, and with justice, because even the masters, the CEOs, the president of the company, the board members, the investors, the leaders, the managers, all of them answer to a master in heaven. And because of that, we should take consideration of how we treat people as employers. So you got it right. The employer should treat the employee with dignity, with justice, with respect, because they have a master as well. And someday they're going to answer to that ultimate authority. James 2:13 says this, "For judgment is without mercy to him who has shown no mercy. Mercy triumphs over judgment." Everyone who is rich or benefits from the services of an employee should consider what James chapter 5 verses 1 through 6 says. I'm not going to read that for you, but if you're an employer, you should go read that passage because it gives you something really solid to think about and to consider, because we all will stand before a judge. But if you're in a position of authority, whether that's a minister at a church or a manager or a owner of a company, and you have employees, we will all give an account for how we treat those people who are under our service or our leadership. We're going to look at Colossians chapter 4, verses 2 through 6 next time. So I look forward to seeing you next week.